Every Bigfoot researcher dreams of the same thing: a single, clear encounter. One moment where the creature appears, stays visible long enough for documentation, and provides the evidence that would finally convince the skeptics. Researchers spend years trekking through remote wilderness, setting up trail cameras, analyzing footprints, hoping for that one perfect sighting. But there's something most people don't know about, something that challenges everything we think we understand about these creatures and their relationship with humans. There are places where Bigfoot doesn't run away, locations where these beings don't avoid human contact, but instead seek it out. Properties where the same creatures return night after night, year after year, establishing what researchers call habituation, ongoing, repeated contact between humans and these enigmatic beings. These aren't random encounters in the wilderness. These are relationships, patterns of interaction that unfold over months, sometimes decades. And what happens at these sites suggests these creatures aren't simply avoiding humans out of fear or instinct. They're making deliberate choices about when to reveal themselves, who to approach, and what they want us to understand. Dr. Elizabeth Grant spent 20 years as an anthropologist studying human-primate interactions in Africa and Southeast Asia. She documented how chimpanzees and gorillas gradually habituate to human observers, how trust develops over time, how behavioral patterns shift as wild primates become comfortable with human presence. When she began investigating reports of Bigfoot habituation sites in North America, she expected to find exaggeration, misidentification, or outright fabrication. What she discovered instead was something far more complex: evidence that these creatures were engaging in what could only be described as anthropological study. Not humans studying them, but them studying us. The evidence from these sites challenges the fundamental assumption that Bigfoot is simply an undiscovered ape hiding in North America's forests. Because the behavior documented at habituation locations suggests intelligence on par with humans, curiosity that drives scientific observation, and social structures complex enough to make collective decisions about contact. This isn't about proving Bigfoot exists. The people at these sites stopped worrying about proof years ago. They see these creatures regularly, sometimes weekly, sometimes nightly. This is about understanding what these beings want, why they choose certain humans for contact, and what happens when the boundary between our worlds becomes permeable. What emerges from years of documentation at habituation sites is a picture that's both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Because if these creatures are studying us with the same methodical attention we've been trying to study them, the question isn't whether Bigfoot is real. The question is, what have they learned about us, and what are they planning to do with that knowledge? The term habituation comes from primatology. It describes the process by which wild apes gradually become accustomed to human observers, losing their fear response and eventually tolerating close proximity. Jane Goodall's work with chimpanzees at Gombe took years of patient, non-threatening presence before the chimps accepted her into their daily routines. In Bigfoot research, habituation means something similar, but with a crucial difference. The creatures aren't just tolerating human presence, they're actively choosing to engage. Dr. Grant explains the distinction. In traditional primatology, habituation is something humans do to primates through persistent, careful observation. The researcher is the active party, gradually conditioning the animals to accept their presence. But at Bigfoot habituation sites, the dynamic is reversed. The creatures are the ones initiating and controlling contact. They choose when to appear, how close to come, and when to withdraw. The humans are essentially passive recipients of attention. The pattern typically begins with subtle signs. Property owners in remote or semi-remote areas start noticing unusual occurrences. Large footprints appearing in soft ground near the tree line, massive handprints on windows or vehicles. Vocalizations at night, howls, screams, or knocking sounds that don't match any known animal. Most people at this stage assume bears, hikers, or their imagination, but then the signs escalate. Food left outside disappears in ways that don't match animal scavenging, taken cleanly without scattering or mess. Structures appear, stick formations arranged in deliberate patterns, stones stacked in cairns, branches woven into shapes that couldn't form naturally. These aren't random. They appear in specific locations, often near pathways between the house and the forest, or near where property owners spend time outside. They seem designed to be noticed, to communicate presence without direct confrontation. What struck me, Dr. Grant noted, was the consistent progression. It's not random chaos. There's a methodology to it. The creatures establish presence through ambiguous signs first, things that could be dismissed. Then they gradually increase the obviousness of their presence, as if testing how the human residents will respond. The critical moment comes when the property owner acknowledges the presence and responds positively. This might mean leaving food intentionally, speaking aloud to the forest, acknowledging awareness of being watched, or simply reacting with curiosity rather than fear or hostility. When this happens, the relationship enters a new phase. The creatures become bolder. Sightings increase. The interactions become more complex. What began as mysterious signs transforms into something that resembles genuine communication. Dr. Grant identified several criteria that distinguish genuine habituation from random encounters. Consistency. The same location experiences repeated activity over extended periods, months to years. Escalation. The interactions progress from subtle to overt in a predictable pattern. Specificity. The creatures focus attention on specific individuals, often ignoring or avoiding others on the same property. Intelligence. The behaviors demonstrate problem-solving, pattern recognition, and adaptive responses to human actions. Reciprocity. The relationship involves exchange, gifts left by both parties, responses to specific actions, apparent communication. These criteria eliminate misidentification, bears, or human hoaxes. The pattern is too consistent, too complex, and too sustained to be anything other than deliberate interaction by intelligent beings. But here's what makes habituation sites so compelling. There are dozens of them, documented across North America, all following remarkably similar patterns. Different locations, different witnesses, different circumstances, but the same progression, the same behaviors, the same sense of being chosen for contact. Dr. Grant compiled case files on over 40 locations, meeting the habituation criteria. She interviewed property owners, reviewed documentation including photographs, audio recordings, and journals tracking years of interactions. What emerged was a picture of systematic contact that suggested these creatures weren't randomly wandering through human-occupied areas. They were conducting research, and the humans at habituation sites were their subjects. To understand what this means, we need to look closely at specific cases, witnesses who've lived this phenomenon for years and documented the progression from first signs to ongoing relationship. People who've moved past the question of whether Bigfoot exists and into the far more complex territory of why these beings want contact and what they're learning from it. Matthew Johnson isn't someone you'd expect to claim ongoing contact with Bigfoot. He's a clinical psychologist with a PhD, licensed to practice in multiple states, someone whose professional reputation depends on credibility and rational analysis. In July 2000, while hiking with his family in the Oregon Caves National Monument, Johnson had an encounter that changed his life. He saw a large, hair-covered bipedal creature watching his family from behind a tree. The sighting lasted only seconds, but it was close, perhaps 50 feet, and undeniable. Most people would have left it at that. A single encounter, a strange experience, move on with life. Johnson couldn't. The intelligence he'd seen in the creature's eyes, the deliberate way it had positioned itself to observe his family, suggested something more than animal curiosity. He began researching Bigfoot seriously, reading everything available, connecting with other researchers, and in 2012, he purchased property in southern Oregon specifically because of reported activity in the area. What happened next unfolded over years. Initially, the property seemed quiet. Johnson and his family would visit on weekends, camping and exploring. Then the signs began. Large footprints near their camp, stones thrown from the forest, landing near but never at them. A behavior documented at other habituation sites. Johnson started leaving gifts, apples, other fruits, occasionally baked goods. The food would disappear overnight. Then gifts started appearing in return. Unusual stones placed prominently where Johnson would find them, perfectly symmetrical stick structures that hadn't been there hours before. I realized they were acknowledging the exchange, Johnson explained. This wasn't just taking food. They were reciprocating. That implies social awareness, understanding of reciprocity as a concept. That's not animal behavior. That's cultural behavior. The interactions escalated. Johnson began hearing vocalizations when he was alone on the property. Whistles, knocks, occasionally what sounded like mimicry of his own sounds. He started speaking aloud when he felt he was being observed, explaining his intentions, expressing peaceful intent. One evening in 2013, Johnson was sitting by his campfire when he heard movement in the forest nearby. He called out, inviting whoever was there to come closer if they wanted. The movement stopped. Then, in the darkness just beyond the firelight, he saw a massive figure standing motionless. It was perhaps 20 feet away, Johnson recalled, just standing there watching me. I could see the outline, the size, at least 8 feet tall. I didn't move. I kept talking quietly, saying I meant no harm. It stood there for maybe 5 minutes. Then it simply turned and walked away. No hurry, no fear. It was in control of the entire interaction. Over subsequent years, Johnson documented dozens of encounters on the property. He installed audio recording equipment and captured hours of vocalizations. He took plaster casts of footprints showing consistent anatomical features, dermal ridges, a mid-tarsal break, toe spread patterns that appeared in prints taken months apart. But the most compelling evidence was behavioral. The creatures on Johnson's property demonstrated awareness of his schedule, appearing more frequently when he was alone and avoiding times when he brought skeptical visitors. They responded to specific actions. If Johnson left certain types of food, those would be taken. If he tried to set up cameras in obvious locations, the creatures would avoid those areas. They know what cameras are, Johnson concluded. They understand that certain objects are for observation, and they choose whether to allow themselves to be captured or not. That level of awareness is remarkable. Dr. Grant visited Johnson's property multiple times. What struck me was the consistency of the evidence, she noted. This wasn't someone fabricating stories. The footprints were anatomically consistent with casts from other locations. The audio recordings matched vocalizations documented elsewhere, and Johnson's demeanor. He didn't seem like a person seeking attention. He seemed like a researcher documenting ongoing observations. Johnson's case represents the classic habituation pattern: initial contact, graduated escalation, evidence of intelligence, reciprocal interaction, and ultimately a form of relationship where both parties understand the terms of engagement. But not all habituation sites follow such a peaceful trajectory. Some witnesses at habituation sites choose anonymity, fearing ridicule or unwanted attention. Dr. Grant refers to this case as the Kentucky property, a rural homestead where a family has experienced intensive interaction for over 15 years. The property is isolated, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides, with the nearest neighbor over a mile away. The family, a couple and their adult children, had lived there for a decade before anything unusual occurred. In 2008, the father began finding evidence of something large moving through their property at night. Massive footprints in the garden, an entire row of corn broken down, eaten, in a manner inconsistent with deer or other animals. A storage shed that had been locked was found open, with tools moved around inside. The family installed motion sensor lights and a security camera system. The lights would trigger frequently at night, but the cameras captured nothing, either producing corrupted files or showing the area with nothing visible, even when footsteps could be heard on the audio. That's when we realized something unusual was happening, the father explained. Whatever was triggering the lights was also somehow interfering with the cameras. That's not bare behavior, that's technological awareness. The mother began leaving food out intentionally. Large quantities of fruit, vegetables, occasionally raw meat. The food would vanish overnight. But then the family started experiencing something unsettling. The creatures weren't just taking food. They were watching the family inside their home. We'd hear knocking on the walls at night, the mother said. Loud, deliberate knocking. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. It would move around the perimeter of the house. We'd follow the sound from inside, and it would stay just ahead of us like it was aware we were tracking it. The adult daughter reported waking multiple times to see a massive face pressed against her second-story window, something that should be impossible given the height and lack of anything to climb. The face would be there one moment, gone the next. I should have been terrified, she said, but I wasn't. There was curiosity in the eyes, not aggression. It felt like it was studying me, trying to understand what I was. The family began experiencing stranger phenomena. Objects inside the house would be moved, keys relocated, tools rearranged. Nothing was damaged or stolen, just moved, as if to demonstrate presence and ability to enter the home undetected. One night, the father confronted this directly. He stood in his living room and spoke aloud. I know you're here. I know you can hear me. If you want something, show yourself. Stop hiding. That night, the knocking stopped. But the next morning, they found a series of stones arranged in a perfect circle in their front yard, surrounding a large handprint pressed into the soft earth. The print showed 4 fingers and a thumb, but the dimensions were enormous, easily twice the size of a large human hand. That was their answer, the father concluded. They were saying, yes, we hear you, we're here, and this is proof. After that, the relationship changed. They became less intrusive, more respectful of boundaries, but they also became more visible, as if the direct communication had established new terms. Dr. Grant analyzed the handprint photos and compared them to casts from other locations. The proportions are consistent with what we see elsewhere, she confirmed. The finger length to palm ratio, the thumb placement, these match other documented evidence. This wasn't fabricated. What troubles Dr. Grant about this case is the escalation pattern. They were testing boundaries, she explained. Entering the home, watching family members sleep, that's not random behavior. They were assessing what they could do, how the family would respond, where the limits were. That suggests sophisticated social intelligence and strategic thinking. The Kentucky family continues to experience regular activity. They've become accustomed to the presence, leaving food regularly, acknowledging the creatures when they sense they're being watched. But the dynamic remains unsettling, a relationship characterized by observation and boundary testing more than mutual comfort. Dr. Sarah Browning is a retired wildlife biologist who spent 30 years working for the U.S. Forest Service. She's conducted field research on bears, mountain lions, and wolves. She understands animal behavior, tracking, and the difference between wildlife encounters and something anomalous. In 2005, she purchased property in Northern California as a retirement retreat, 40 acres of mixed forest adjacent to national forest land. She knew the area had historical Bigfoot reports, but considered that local folklore, nothing scientific. Her perspective changed within months of moving in. Browning began finding footprints on her property that didn't match any known animal. As a trained tracker, she could identify bear, deer, elk, and human prints easily. These were different, large, bipedal, showing anatomical features she couldn't explain. The mid-tarsal break was obvious, she explained. The foot was flexing in the middle, something human feet don't do because of our arch structure. The toe spread was extreme, showing adaptation for gripping uneven terrain. These weren't human prints and weren't fake. The depth, the pressure variations, the way soil was displaced, all indicated a heavy, living creature. Browning did what any scientist would. She began systematic documentation. She set up game cameras, collected footprint casts, recorded audio, and maintained detailed journals of all observations. The creatures on her property seemed to respond to this scientific approach. They became more active, leaving evidence in locations where Browning would easily find it. Footprints would appear on paths she walked regularly. Structures would be built near her cabin, elaborate formations of stacked stones or woven branches that definitely weren't natural. It felt like they were participating in the study, Browning noted. I was documenting them, and they were accommodating that, providing evidence, making themselves more observable. That's not how wildlife behaves. Wildlife avoids documentation. Then the interactions became explicitly communicative. Browning would find stones arranged in patterns, circles, lines, sometimes shapes that resembled letters or symbols. When she rearranged these stones into her own patterns, she'd return the next day to find them altered again, as if in response. I was essentially exchanging symbolic communication with an unknown intelligence, she said. That's when I realized this wasn't just a biological specimen to be studied. These were thinking beings, aware of me as an individual engaging in deliberate interaction. The most remarkable incident occurred in 2011. Browning had been tracking a family group of creatures on her property. Based on footprint sizes, she estimated 2 adults and a juvenile. One morning, she found the juvenile's prints approaching her cabin alone, circling the building multiple times at a distance of perhaps 30 feet. That afternoon, while sitting on her porch, Browning saw the juvenile emerge from the forest. It was perhaps 6 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, clearly young, but already massive by human standards. We made eye contact, Browning recalled. It stood there at the edge of the tree line, maybe 60 feet away, just looking at me. I didn't move. I barely breathed. It tilted its head like it was curious. Then it stepped further into the clearing, moved perhaps 10 feet closer, and stopped again. This continued for several minutes, the juvenile advancing incrementally, pausing, observing Browning's reaction. Eventually, it was within 30 feet, close enough that Browning could see detailed features, the facial structure, the way muscles moved beneath the hair, the obvious intelligence in the eyes. Then I heard a loud vocalization from the forest, a deep, booming call, Browning said. The juvenile immediately turned and ran back to the tree line, disappearing into the forest. An adult had called it back, but what struck me was the purpose of the encounter. That juvenile was sent to observe me up close. It was young enough that the adults felt it could take the risk. Or maybe they were teaching it, showing it that some humans are safe. It wasn't random. It was intentional. Dr. Grant considers Browning's case particularly significant. She brings professional training to her observations, Grant explained. She understands scientific methodology, evidence collection, and animal behavior. When someone with her background says these creatures are demonstrating intelligence comparable to humans, that carries weight. Browning continues to document activity on her property. She's collected over 200 footprint casts, thousands of hours of audio, and hundreds of photographs of structures and evidence. But she's given up trying to convince the scientific establishment. They won't accept this until someone produces a body, she said. But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in understanding. And what I've learned is that these beings are far more complex than anyone imagines. They have social structures, They make strategic decisions. They're capable of abstract thought and communication. Whether science acknowledges that or not, doesn't change what I observe every day. These 3 cases represent just a fraction of documented habituation sites across North America. The patterns are consistent, the evidence is compelling, and the implications are profound. If you're intrigued by this investigation into one of the most complex mysteries of our time, consider subscribing. We'll continue exploring phenomena that challenge conventional understanding and force us to reconsider what we think we know about reality. Now let's examine what all these cases have in common and what that tells us about these creatures' intentions. After analyzing dozens of habituation cases, Dr. Grant identified patterns so consistent they couldn't be coincidental. These weren't random encounters or misidentified wildlife. These were deliberate, systematic interactions following a recognizable methodology. Every habituation case begins the same way: subtle signs that could be dismissed or ignored. Food disappears. Faint sounds at night. Ambiguous evidence like bent branches or disturbed soil. This is the testing phase, Dr. Grant explained. The creatures are assessing the human occupants. How do they react to unusual occurrences? Do they respond with fear, aggression, or curiosity? This initial phase can last weeks or months. Property owners who respond with hostility, setting traps, firing weapons into the forest, bringing aggressive groups of people to hunt for the source, typically see the activity cease entirely. The creatures withdraw and the property returns to normal. But owners who respond with neutral acceptance or positive curiosity see the activity escalate. The signs become less ambiguous. The presence becomes more obvious. They're selecting for temperament, Dr. Grant noted. They want contact with humans who won't respond with violence. That's a sophisticated risk assessment that requires understanding human behavioral patterns. At nearly every established habituation site, property owners report an exchange of gifts. Humans leave food, and the creatures reciprocate with objects. Unusual stones, feathers, bones arranged in patterns, occasionally crafted items like twisted branches or woven grass. This behavior is well documented in primatology. Some primate species engage in gift-giving as social bonding, but what's remarkable about Bigfoot gifting behavior is the apparent intentionality and appropriateness of the gifts. One witness reported leaving fresh baked bread regularly. One morning, she found a perfectly intact bird nest placed on her porch railing, something beautiful and fragile, positioned carefully where it wouldn't be damaged. It felt like they were giving me something they valued in return for what I'd given them, she explained. Another property owner left children's toys, balls, simple plastic figures. The creatures would take these, but return them days later, placed in prominent locations. Sometimes the toys would be arranged in patterns or configurations that seemed purposeful. This goes beyond simple food exchange, Dr. Grant observed. They're demonstrating awareness of symbolic value, reciprocity as a social concept, and even aesthetic appreciation. These are hallmarks of cultural behavior, not instinct. Witnesses at habituation sites consistently report vocalizations that seem designed for communication, not random howls or grunts, but sounds that occur in context, that respond to human actions, that seem to carry meaning. Property owners report whistles that answer their own whistles, knocking patterns that mirror knocks they've made, and occasionally what sounds like attempted speech, rough, guttural sounds that approximate words. Matthew Johnson documented an incident where he repeatedly called out hello into the forest. Minutes later, he heard a deep, resonant sound that approximated he-oo, not quite human speech, but clearly an attempt to mimic the pattern of sounds he'd made. Vocal mimicry indicates not just intelligence, but social learning, Dr. Grant explained. The ability to hear a sound and attempt to reproduce it requires sophisticated cognitive processing and motor control, and doing it in social context, as response rather than random repetition, suggests communicative intent. One of the most unsettling common patterns is boundary testing. The creatures seem to systematically assess what they can do without triggering negative response. This includes approaching buildings progressively closer, touching vehicles or structures, leaving evidence in more prominent locations, and occasionally making their presence known during daytime rather than exclusively at night. The Kentucky family's experience of having creatures enter their home and move objects is an extreme example, but lesser boundary testing is nearly universal. Creatures will approach within sight of windows, leave footprints on porches, or handle objects left outside. They're mapping the boundaries of acceptable interaction, Dr. Grant noted. How close can we get? What can we touch? When will the humans object? This is experimental behavior, methodical testing of parameters. It requires planning and analytical thinking. Perhaps the most telling pattern. The creatures choose when and to whom they reveal themselves. They appear more readily when witnesses are alone, particularly when those witnesses have shown consistent positive behavior, leaving gifts, speaking respectfully, maintaining calm demeanor. When skeptical visitors arrive, activity typically ceases. Property owners consistently report that they can't show the creatures to others on demand. The beings remain hidden when they choose to, appearing only under conditions they find acceptable. Dr. Sarah Browning documented this extensively. "When I'm alone on my property, I have encounters regularly," she explained. "But I've had colleagues visit, other biologists, researchers I trust, and during those visits, nothing happens. No vocalizations, no sightings, no evidence. It's as if the creatures know when I have guests and choose to avoid those times." This selective visibility demonstrates several sophisticated capabilities: the ability to observe and recognize individual humans, the capacity to distinguish between familiar and unfamiliar people, the strategic thinking to control when contact occurs, and the social intelligence to understand that some humans are safe, while others might not be. "This isn't how animals behave," Dr. Grant emphasized. "This is how intelligent beings with complex social understanding behave. They're making decisions based on assessment of individuals and circumstances. That requires a level of cognitive sophistication we typically only see in humans, and possibly a few great ape species under specific conditions. These patterns, appearing consistently across dozens of independent locations with witnesses who've never met or coordinated stories, suggest something profound. These creatures aren't randomly wandering into human-occupied areas. They're conducting systematic contact, following a methodology that appears designed to establish relationship while minimizing risk. But to what end? What are they trying to accomplish? And what happens as these relationships deepen and the boundaries between human and Bigfoot worlds continue to blur? As habituation relationships deepen and extend over years, witnesses begin reporting phenomena that go beyond biological creatures exhibiting intelligent behavior. They report experiences that challenge our understanding of physical reality itself. Dr. Grant struggled with this aspect of her research. "I'm a trained scientist," she explained. "I deal in observable, measurable phenomena, but I can't ignore what witnesses consistently report simply because it doesn't fit conventional models. The scientific method requires following evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads somewhere uncomfortable." Multiple property owners report experiences of unusual synchronicity, events that seem too perfectly timed to be coincidental. Matthew Johnson described an incident where he was alone on his property, thinking about his daughter who was away at college. He hadn't spoken aloud, hadn't vocalized his thoughts in any way. That evening, he found a gift left in his usual location, a perfectly heart-shaped stone. "I'd never found a heart-shaped stone there before," Johnson said. "And the timing. The same day I was particularly missing my daughter, thinking about family love. It felt like a response to unspoken emotion." The Kentucky family reported similar experiences. The father would think about visiting the property on a specific weekend, and when they arrived, there would be fresh evidence of activity. Structures built since their last visit, positioned where the family would easily find them upon arrival. "It was as if they knew we were coming," the father explained. "We didn't have a regular schedule. Sometimes weeks would pass between visits, but they seemed to anticipate our arrival." This raises disturbing questions. Are these creatures somehow aware of human thoughts or intentions? Can they sense emotional states or read nonverbal cues in ways we don't understand? Dr. Grant consulted with psychologists and neuroscientists about the possibility of heightened empathic ability or nonverbal communication. "Humans pick up on subtle social cues constantly: body language, micro-expressions, pheromones we process unconsciously," one psychologist explained. "If these beings have more acute sensory perception, they might detect human emotional states we're not consciously broadcasting." But the experiences witnesses report go beyond reading body language. They describe feeling watched even when no one is visible, receiving responses to thoughts rather than spoken words, and experiencing what feels like direct mind-to-mind communication. At virtually every habituation site, witnesses report consistent problems with electronic equipment. Cameras malfunction or produce corrupted files. Recording devices experience battery drain far faster than normal. Motion sensors trigger with nothing visible. GPS units lose signal. Even vehicle electronics behave erratically. Dr. Sarah Browning documented this extensively. "I'm a trained field researcher. I know how to use equipment properly," she emphasized, "but cameras I've used successfully for years produce nothing but corrupted files on my property. Fresh batteries die within hours. SD cards that work fine everywhere else fail consistently at home." She conducted a controlled experiment using identical equipment on her property and at control locations elsewhere. The equipment functioned normally at control sites, but experienced high failure rates at her property, specifically in areas where creature activity was most frequent. I measured electromagnetic field variations and found anomalies in locations where I'd had sightings, Browning reported. Fluctuations that don't occur naturally and don't match any known electromagnetic sources. Something about these creatures, or their presence, creates electromagnetic disturbances. The Kentucky family stopped trying to capture video evidence after their entire camera system was destroyed in a single night. Every camera simultaneously failed, the hard drive corrupted, the system irreparably damaged. There was no storm, no power surge, no external cause we could identify, the father said. The system just died, completely and totally, in one night. This electromagnetic effect appears connected to the creature's presence. Property owners report that equipment failures occur during periods of high activity and resolve during quiet periods. The correlation is too consistent to be coincidental. Dr. Grant consulted with physicists about possible mechanisms. If biological organisms could generate or manipulate electromagnetic fields, one physicist speculated, it would explain the equipment failures, but we don't know of any mechanism by which that's possible in large mammals. It would require biological structures we haven't observed in any known species. Several witnesses at habituation sites report experiences of time distortion, periods where time seems to pass differently than normal, or gaps where they lose time entirely. One property owner described an evening where he stepped outside to check on sounds he'd heard. "I stood on my porch for what felt like maybe 5 minutes," he recalled. "Then I went back inside and checked the clock. 2 hours had passed. 2 hours I have no memory of, no sense of having experienced. I was just outside on my porch and then hours were gone." Another witness reported the opposite experience. "I was working in my garden, fully engaged in planting. I looked up and the sun had barely moved, but I checked my watch and 4 hours had passed. It felt like maybe 30 minutes, but 4 hours of daylight were gone. The disconnect between my perception and actual time was extreme." Dr. Grant found these reports troubling. Time distortion is associated with psychological trauma, dissociative states, or neurological conditions, she noted. But these witnesses don't show signs of trauma or dissociation. They're describing isolated incidents during times of apparent creature activity. The correlation suggests these experiences are related to the encounters themselves. The mechanism is unclear. Are the creatures somehow affecting human perception of time? Are witnesses entering altered consciousness states during encounters? Or is something about the encounters literally affecting the flow of time in localized areas? "Physics tells us time is relative, not absolute," Dr. Grant said. "It can be affected by gravity, velocity, and potentially other factors we don't fully understand. If these beings exist partially in different dimensional states, as some theories suggest, perhaps their presence creates temporal distortions at the intersection between dimensions." One of the most compelling aspects of habituation sites is that multiple witnesses independently report identical experiences, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes separated by time. At Matthew Johnson's property, he and a visiting researcher both reported seeing the same specific gesture from a creature, a hand raised, palm forward, in what appeared to be a greeting or acknowledgement. The researcher visited months after Johnson first observed this gesture, and neither had described it to the other before the researcher's independent report. "We compared notes afterward," Johnson explained. "We'd both seen the exact same motion from what appeared to be the same individual creature based on size and coloring. That consistency suggests deliberate, repeated behavior, communication, using gesture." The Kentucky family reported an even stranger shared experience. The mother and daughter, sleeping in separate rooms, both woke simultaneously at 3:17 a.m. Both reported seeing a large face at their windows. The mother's room was first floor, the daughter's second floor. Both described the same facial features and expression. When they compared notes in the morning, their descriptions were identical down to specific details. "The chances of us having identical dreams at the exact same time are astronomical," the daughter said. "And these weren't dreams. We were both fully awake, both saw the same thing. It was real, and it was coordinated somehow." Dr. Grant documented multiple cases of family members or visitors experiencing identical phenomena independently. "The consistency rules out individual hallucination or misperception," she noted. "When multiple witnesses report the same unusual experience without prior communication, we have to take that seriously as evidence of something objectively occurring. These shared experiences suggest the creatures are capable of affecting multiple humans simultaneously, or that they're deliberately creating experiences designed to be witnessed by multiple people to establish credibility." The phenomena reported at habituation sites push far beyond simple wildlife encounters. into territory that challenges our understanding of consciousness, perception, and reality itself. If you're finding this investigation thought-provoking and want to explore more mysteries that exist at the boundaries of known science, subscribe to continue this journey into the unexplained. Because what happens next, the implications of these prolonged contacts, may be the most unsettling aspect of all. The consistent patterns, the escalating complexity of interactions, the apparent study of human behavior, all of this points to a disturbing conclusion. Habituation sites aren't just places where humans observe Bigfoot. They're places where Bigfoot observes humans. Dr. Grant's anthropological background led her to this interpretation. When I studied primate habituation in Africa, I was the researcher studying them, she explained. But at Bigfoot habituation sites, the dynamic is inverted. The creatures are studying us, our behavior, our patterns, our reactions, our technology, our social structures. They're the anthropologists. We're the subjects. Property owners consistently report that creatures seem aware of their schedules, appearing more frequently when occupants are alone, and avoiding times when multiple people are present. Dr. Sarah Browning documented this precisely. I tracked my encounters over 3 years and correlated them with my schedule, she explained. The creatures appeared most frequently when I was alone on my property, particularly during consistent times, early morning or evening. When I had visitors, activity dropped to near zero. When I changed my routine, there was a lag of a few days, then the encounters shifted to match my new schedule. This demonstrates observational learning and pattern recognition. The creatures are monitoring human behavior over time, identifying predictable patterns, and adjusting their own behavior accordingly. They're learning when it's safe to approach, when humans are most receptive, when the risk of aggressive response is lowest, Dr. Grant noted. That's exactly what a field researcher does when studying wild populations: learn the patterns, minimize disturbance, optimize observation opportunities. The equipment failures and camera avoidance documented at habituation sites demonstrate technological awareness. The creatures understand that certain objects are used for observation and documentation. Matthew Johnson conducted an experiment. He set up obvious trail cameras on marked trees and hidden cameras disguised in natural-looking enclosures. The obvious cameras captured nothing, despite being in high-activity areas. The hidden cameras, however, captured thermal signatures and brief footage of large figures passing by. They know what obvious cameras look like, Johnson concluded. They've learned to recognize them and avoid them. But disguised cameras took them longer to identify. Eventually, those got avoided too, which means they're learning what new types of observation equipment look like. This suggests not just intelligence, but adaptive learning. The creatures are updating their knowledge base, recognizing new threats or monitoring devices, and adjusting behavior accordingly. The electromagnetic interference may be even more significant. If the creatures can deliberately disrupt electronic equipment, that implies understanding of how that equipment functions, and purposeful manipulation of electromagnetic fields. We teach chimpanzees and gorillas to use tools, to recognize symbols, even basic sign language, Dr. Grant noted. But we've never taught them to sabotage recording equipment. If these creatures can do that, they've figured out technology on their own, understanding cause and effect relationships that require sophisticated reasoning. The selective visibility and differential treatment of various humans demonstrates individual recognition and personality assessment. At virtually every habituation site, certain individuals have regular encounters while others don't. The creatures seem to make distinctions between property owners, guests, family members, and strangers. One family reported that their teenage son had frequent sightings, while his sister, who actively wanted to see the creatures, never encountered them. "My daughter would go outside specifically hoping to see them," the mother explained, "but they never appeared for her. My son, who was more neutral about the whole thing, saw them regularly. It was like they were choosing who to reveal themselves to based on something. Attitude, intention, we couldn't figure it out." Dr. Grant believes the creatures are assessing threat level and receptivity. "Think about how we evaluate people," she explained. "We make quick judgments based on body language, vocal tone, behavioral cues. These creatures are doing the same thing, but possibly with more acute sensory perception. They can assess who's dangerous, who's curious, who's respectful, who's exploitative. This individual assessment requires social intelligence comparable to humans. It means maintaining mental models of different individuals, tracking their behavior over time, and making predictions about how they'll respond in various situations." The boundary testing behavior documented at habituation sites suggests the creatures are actively experimenting with human reactions. They escalate intrusions gradually, first touching vehicles outside, then structures, then leaving evidence closer to dwellings, eventually approaching windows or even entering buildings. Each escalation is followed by a pause, as if assessing the human response before proceeding. This is experimental methodology, Dr. Grant observed. They're testing hypotheses. If we do X, will the humans do Y? Then observing the results and adjusting accordingly. That's scientific thinking. That's research. The Kentucky family's experience of objects being moved inside their home is a clear example. After the family expressed frustration aloud about the intrusions, the interior movement stopped, but the exterior activity continued. The creatures had learned that entering the home crossed a boundary the humans weren't comfortable with, so they adjusted their behavior while maintaining contact in acceptable ways. They're learning our limits, our comfort zones, our triggers for fear or aggression, Dr. Grant concluded. They're building a comprehensive understanding of human psychology and behavior. The question is, why? What are they planning to do with this knowledge? If the creatures at habituation sites are systematically studying humans, several disturbing questions emerge. Questions that force reconsideration of humanity's relationship with these beings and our place in the larger picture. The habituation sites documented in recent decades might not be new phenomena. Indigenous accounts going back centuries describe similar relationships, specific families or individuals who maintained contact with the forest people, locations where regular interaction occurred, gifts exchanged and boundaries negotiated. Tribal elders speak of families who've had relationships with these beings for generations, Dr. Grant noted. Not occasional random encounters, but ongoing contact passed down through family lines. That suggests habituation has been occurring for far longer than modern researchers realized. If these relationships have existed for centuries or longer, the creature's understanding of humans isn't newly developing, it's already well established. They may know far more about us than we know about them. That changes the dynamic entirely, Dr. Grant said. We think we're just beginning to study them, but they may have been studying us for centuries. We may be catching up to research they've been conducting for generations. Not all habituation sites follow the same pattern. Some are characterized by peaceful interaction and mutual respect. Others involve more aggressive boundary testing and intimidation behaviors. This variation suggests different groups of creatures may have different attitudes toward humans. Some may view humans as potential allies or subjects for benign study. Others may see humans as threats or resources to be exploited. We see this in primate populations, Dr. Grant explained. Different chimpanzee groups have different cultural behaviors and different attitudes toward humans. Some groups are peaceful and tolerant, others are aggressive and territorial. If Bigfoot has similar social complexity, we'd expect to see variation between different populations. The implications are significant. It means some habituation sites might be safe, characterized by genuine mutual respect and careful boundaries, but others might be dangerous, involving creatures whose intentions toward humans aren't benign. Property owners need to understand they're not dealing with a monolithic species with uniform behavior, Dr. Grant cautioned. They're dealing with intelligent beings who have individual personalities, cultural differences, and varying motivations. Some encounters may be positive, others could be dangerous. The most fundamental question remains unanswered. What's the purpose of these interactions? Some researchers believe the creatures are simply curious, studying humans the way primatologists study apes, academic interest in understanding another intelligent species. Others suggest more practical motivations. Perhaps the creatures are assessing whether humans could be allies against some unknown threat, or evaluating whether we're dangerous and need to be monitored, or testing whether contact could be expanded beyond these limited habituation sites. The gift exchanges suggest they value relationship, not just observation, Dr. Grant noted. They're investing time and resources in maintaining these connections. That implies the relationships themselves have value beyond mere data collection. Some property owners believe the creatures are lonely, seeking social contact with the only other intelligent species they regularly encounter. They seem curious about our lives, interested in what we do, how we live, one witness explained. It feels less like clinical observation and more like social interest. But darker possibilities exist. Perhaps the creatures are studying human weaknesses, assessing vulnerabilities, preparing for some future action we can't anticipate. We simply don't know their intentions, Dr. Grant admitted, and that uncertainty is inherently unsettling. We're engaged in contact with an intelligence we don't understand, sharing information about ourselves, our patterns, our technology, our psychology, and we have no idea what they plan to do with that knowledge. The most speculative but perhaps most important question: are habituation sites part of a larger preparation process? Some researchers believe these limited contact points are testing grounds, places where the creatures assess human readiness for broader contact. If that's true, The escalating complexity of interactions might be gradual conditioning, getting humans comfortable with their existence and presence before revealing themselves more widely. Imagine you're a hidden intelligence wanting to eventually reveal yourself to humanity, Dr. Grant posed. You wouldn't just show up suddenly on a global scale. You'd start small. You'd select specific humans who seem receptive. You'd establish relationships, prove you're not dangerous, demonstrate intelligence and peaceful intent. You'd gradually expand contact as acceptance grows. This scenario aligns with the patterns observed at habituation sites, the careful selection of contactees, the graduated escalation, the emphasis on peaceful interaction and communication. All of this could be preparation for eventual wider disclosure. Or, Dr. Grant continued, perhaps they're preparing for the opposite, learning about us before withdrawing completely, before making themselves permanently hidden, understanding the threat we pose so they can avoid us more effectively. Either way, the implication is the same. We're not in control of this contact. They are. They're directing the pace, the terms, the extent of interaction. We're participants in a process they're orchestrating. That's humbling and unsettling, Dr. Grant concluded. We're accustomed to being the dominant intelligence, the species making decisions about contact with other beings. But with Bigfoot, we're the secondary party. They're making the choices, and we're just beginning to realize how little control we actually have. The study of habituation sites is still in its infancy. Only in the last decade have researchers begun systematically documenting these locations and analyzing the patterns. But the implications of what's been discovered are already profound. Dr. Grant advocates for formal, scientific investigation of habituation sites, but with a crucial difference from traditional research approaches. We can't treat this like wildlife observation, she explained. These aren't animals to be studied from blinds and through telephoto lenses. These are intelligent beings who are aware of being studied and who can choose whether to participate in research. We need methodologies that respect their agency and intelligence. She proposes collaborative research, where property owners work with scientists to document interactions while maintaining the respectful relationships they've established. The creatures have chosen these specific humans for contact. We need to honor that choice rather than flooding these sites with researchers and equipment that would cause the beings to withdraw. Some habituation site property owners are open to this approach. Others refuse, fearing that academic involvement would transform their personal relationships into clinical studies and drive the creatures away. I'm not interested in helping scientists get papers published, one property owner said bluntly. These beings trusted me. I'm not going to betray that trust by turning my property into a research circus. This tension between preserving relationships and advancing knowledge remains unresolved. As understanding of habituation sites grows, ethical questions become increasingly urgent. Do property owners have responsibility to report and document these interactions for the broader benefit of human knowledge? Or do they have the right to keep these relationships private? What are the ethical obligations toward the creatures themselves? If they're intelligent beings capable of making choices about contact, don't they have rights? Rights to privacy, to control over their own information, to determine the terms of interaction with humans? We've never faced this situation before, Dr. Grant noted. The ethical frameworks we've developed for research assume we're studying animals without agency or rights. But if these beings are intelligent enough to study us, they deserve consideration as persons, not specimens. Some researchers argue for attempting direct communication, learning their language, establishing explicit protocols for contact, negotiating terms of interaction openly. Others insist that humans should respect the creature's apparent desire for limited contact, allowing them to control the pace and extent of revelation. There's no consensus, Dr. Grant said, and perhaps there shouldn't be. Perhaps different humans and different groups of creatures will negotiate different relationships, just as different human cultures interact with each other in various ways. Nearly every property owner at a habituation site reports that the experience has fundamentally changed them, their worldview, their understanding of reality, their sense of humanity's place in the larger picture. You can't experience this and remain unchanged, Matthew Johnson explained. Realizing there's an intelligent species sharing this continent with us, watching us, studying us, it reframes everything. We're not alone. We're not the only intelligence. And that changes how you see yourself and your species. Dr. Sarah Browning describes feeling humbled. I spent my career thinking I understood wildlife and wilderness, but this showed me how much we don't know, how much mystery still exists, even in places we think we've fully explored and catalogued. The Kentucky family describes a sense of being chosen for something significant. We don't know why they picked our property, our family, the mother said, but we take it seriously. We feel responsibility to honor the relationship, to represent humanity well, to prove that some humans can be trusted. These personal transformations might be as important as any scientific data. The people at habituation sites are pioneers, navigating first contact with an unknown intelligence. Their experiences will shape how humanity eventually understands and relates to these beings. Habituation sites exist within a larger context of unexplained phenomena. The same locations often have reports of UFO activity, unusual lights, temporal distortions, and other anomalous experiences. There may be connections between different types of high strangeness phenomena, Dr. Grant speculated. Bigfoot, UFOs, interdimensional experiences. Perhaps these aren't separate mysteries, but different aspects of a larger reality we're only beginning to perceive. Some researchers believe Bigfoot itself isn't simply a biological species, but something more complex, beings that exist partially in our reality and partially in other states or dimensions, capable of moving between them. This would explain many of the stranger phenomena at habituation sites, the disappearances, the electromagnetic effects, the temporal distortions. If the creatures exist at the intersection of multiple realities, their presence might create exactly these kinds of anomalies. We may be dealing with something that challenges our fundamental understanding of what's possible, Dr. Grant concluded. Not just an unknown animal, but a phenomenon that requires us to expand our conception of reality itself. What happens when Bigfoot stops hiding isn't what anyone expected. It's not triumphant discovery and scientific classification. It's not clear answers to old questions. It's deeper mystery, more questions. Recognition that we're not the researchers we thought we were. We're the subjects. We're being studied, assessed, gradually introduced to an intelligence that's been watching us far longer than we've been aware of it. The people at habituation sites are living on a boundary, between known and unknown, between our reality and something larger and stranger. They're experiencing something most of humanity hasn't yet grasped, that we share this world with intelligence we don't understand. It's exciting and terrifying, one property owner said. Exciting because it means reality is bigger and more mysterious than we thought. Terrifying because we have no idea what comes next. Dr. Grant's investigation continues. She's documenting new habituation sites, tracking patterns, looking for answers to the questions that keep multiplying. The phenomenon is real, she stated unequivocally. These interactions are happening. The evidence is overwhelming for anyone willing to look honestly. But understanding what it means, where it's leading, what the ultimate implications are, we're nowhere close to knowing that. Perhaps that's the real lesson from habituation sites. Perhaps the answer to what happens when Bigfoot stops hiding isn't a final revelation, but an ongoing mystery, a relationship that deepens and becomes more complex the longer it continues. The creatures are still largely hidden, still controlling the terms of contact, still revealing themselves only to those they choose, under conditions they determine. But at dozens of locations across North America, the boundary is permeable. Contact is ongoing. Humans and these beings are learning about each other, studying each other, perhaps preparing for something neither side fully understands yet. Every Bigfoot researcher dreams of the day when proof finally emerges, and the world acknowledges these creatures exist. But the people at habituation sites have moved past that. They're living in a different reality, one where existence is established, and the real questions are about relationship, intention, and the future of contact between our species and theirs. What happens when Bigfoot stops hiding? We become part of their world, just as they've always been part of ours. The boundary dissolves. The mystery doesn't end. It transforms into something more profound and more unsettling. Because the scariest thing about being studied by an intelligence you don't understand isn't that you don't know what they're learning. It's that you don't know what they'll do with that knowledge once they've learned enough. The observations continue. The relationships deepen. The preparation, whatever it's preparing us for, proceeds at a pace the creatures control. And we wait, watching and being watched, wondering whether we're ready for whatever comes next. The habituation phenomenon represents one of the most significant ongoing mysteries of our time. Contact between humanity and an intelligence we're only beginning to understand. If you want to continue exploring this and other phenomena that exist at the edges of known science, where mystery meets evidence and questions lead to deeper questions, subscribe to join this journey. Because the investigation is far from over. In fact, it may just be beginning. These beings are still out there, still watching, still studying us, still deciding what comes next. And at habituation sites across North America, the contact continues.